Hello, I'm Marissa Martino of Paws Reward in Boulder, Colorado, and you're listening to the Paws Reward Podcast, where we stop and reflect on behavior change, dog training, the human-canine bond, and the relationships with our loved ones. I'm excited to have Claire Goyer on the show today. Claire is a certified behavior adjustment training instructor and the online school administrator for the Grisha Stewart Academy of Dog Training and Behavior. Claire has always been fascinated by social relationships among humans and their animal companions and holds a BA degree in social anthropology and classical studies. After a short stint working in Silicon Valley, Claire returned to university and gained her postgraduate diploma in management information systems. Along the way, Claire never lost her interest in animals, particularly dogs, volunteering in various rescues and living with her own rescue pets. In 2015, Claire took the plunge, as most of us do, and she left the corporate world and pursued a career in animals. This eventually led to her running her own dog training business, Capable Canines, and that's how she met the amazing Grisha Stewart and the BAT technique. The rest, as they say, is history. So on to the podcast episode where we talk about how important it is to build community with our clients, each other, and our colleagues in order to make the impact that we're all longing for. Hello, listeners. I am really excited to have Claire Goyer on the podcast today. Claire and I met through our collaboration on Grisha Stewart's amazing online school. And I just loved your energy and our conversation about all things. And I just knew you were such an amazing podcast guest. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Marissa. I'm really excited to be here. It feels really strange being on this side of a podcast or an interview because usually I'm hosting and doing, the other job. So this is a bit interesting. So I'm really looking forward to having a chat with you today.
Yeah, I remember when I met you, you were like, one of my superpowers is like helping other people express their superpower. And I was like, wow, I love how you said that, right? Like, you're right. You're on the other end, helping people talk about their webinars or the information that they want to impart to our community. And here you are on the opposite side.
It is. It's very, very strange. I think getting to that, to understanding that superpower was actually quite a long road. I think in our society, we tend to praise the inventors. We tend to praise the people behind the microphones on the stage. And we tend to not forget, but we tend to not incorporate the people behind the scenes, the stage managers, the producers, the administrators. And really, that is such an important job, and it is a superpower in itself. Giving platforms and giving other people the space to have their voices heard is such an amazing thing. And to understand when your own voice is not needed in the conversation, right? But being able to identify that somebody else's is, right? And, this person has a lot to say. They've studied this particular topic. They're really interesting, etc. They need a voice. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say about X, but they probably do want to hear what this lady has to say or this person has to say about X. So that's what I do.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so you live with your partner, Adam, and your two dogs, Juno and Oliver. And two cats, Mr. Stripe and Princess Sophia Bandita.
Yes,
Bandita. So I want to know, what are your favorite things about your animals?
Ooh, yeah.
Your four-legged.
I know, my four-legged animals. They're all animals, aren't they? It's interesting because when you asked me this question earlier, I thought to myself, I should be my usual self and make a list and things. And then I thought, no, actually, I'm going to go because I'm the queen of lists, right?
Same.
But I thought, no, I'm just going to go with the first thing that comes to my gut, right? So,
I love that.
So when you say, what do you love most about Juno? Juno, I love her tenacity, and she is a trier, and I love that about Juno. So Juno has a very complicated history. She's a Portuguese cattle dog So her breed name in Portuguese is Barbada de Terceira. So we normally say Portuguese cattle dog. She came to us, and it's a very long and complicated story, which I don't really want to get into, but when she arrived with us, she was 9 months old, and she had a super huge bag packed full of challenges. And she carried that very heavily on her shoulders. And she was frightened to go into different rooms in the house. Forget about taking her outside on a walk. No, we had to work on helping her understand it's okay to move from room to room in the house. Nothing's going to hurt you, and all of that entailed. She also was diagnosed at about 3 weeks after she arrived with us as having severe bilateral hip dysplasia, one of the worst cases that the specialist vet has ever seen. We took her to Madrid and saw a vet there who's one of the world leading experts, and he was like, I'm really sorry, but she's very bad. So she's got a lot on her plate, but boy, does she ever try. You can just see it in her face. She just goes, I'm gonna give it a go. I really am. And she's so smart, and she's so clever, and she has a tenacity that I just absolutely love. We have to be very aware of it, though, because we have to be careful that we don't misinterpret her willingness to try as us pushing her, that she's doing it because she wants to make us feel good, right? And I have to keep going, and she goes beyond what she's capable of because she's basically trying to please us or meet another need. So we have to be very careful about that. But I do love that. I look at her and I just thank God, you little survivor, right? Like she's just, totally. She's just an amazing dog. And Oliver is a totally different dog. Oliver is a Grand Basset Griffon Vendéen. So he's a French Basset Hound. They have a nickname. They're called the Happy Dog. And boy, there isn't a happier dog in the world than a Grand Basset, I have to say. And what I love about Oliver is that he approaches everybody, every dog, every situation with such joy. And he's totally in the moment. You're going to go check the post. It's not exciting, Oliver. Doesn't matter. I love the post. It's great. Yay for the post. The postman arrives. He sees him every day, but it's like, oh, Chico, I missed you. I love you. He's just like, he just loves everybody. And he is definitely a dog. The glass is half full. Actually, everything is full. Everything is wonderful, right?
Yeah, I'm like, I don't think it's half full. I think it's totally
it's
full.
Just full, man. He is full on. And I love it because I have a tendency to be a bit on the negative side. I can be a little bit withdrawn and a little bit suspicious when I meet people. And Oliver teaches me every day that strangers are potential friends, right? You just don't know. And you really should give everybody the benefit of the doubt, because you could have an amazing adventure, or you could get... when we were in Madrid to treat Juno's hips, I used to take Oliver for a walk around our Airbnb, and there was an old folks home right next door, and they had all the elderly folks out in the wheelchairs and things next to the big sidewalk. And I'd walk Oliver down, and I'd be in my own world, worried about Juno and all this stuff and feeling, and then all of a sudden I'd hear in Spanish, is it okay if we pat the dog? And Oliver's there. He's just like, oh, look at all these people. And they had cheese, and every day they would come sit outside and they'd have cheese for him, or a bit of ham or something that they had taken from the breakfast table. And he just met with everybody, and he spread such joy just by being open and approachable. And I think
I love that.
Such an amazing trait. It can get a bit overwhelming at times, but he is who he is. The cats are interesting. So I was never a cat person, right? The first cat I've ever had is actually Mr. Stripe. And we didn't get a cat for a long time because my heart dog James was very anti-cat, right? I mean, the predation was high. And it just wasn't fair. And my partner, Adam, grew up with cats and loved cats, but kind of accepted that if he was with me, there wasn't going to be a cat until Mr. James was departed and on a different plane. And when that happened, we did say we were gonna get a cat, and we would get a stripy cat. You know, when you sit around and you have a glass of wine or whatever, you talk about, and it's going to be a stripy cat, and we'll get this collar. And, anyway, when we were living in Caceres Costa, there was a stray cat colony. Spain has a big feral cat problem. A lot of places do, and they're everywhere. And that particular year, there was quite a lot, and they were living in the bins, which are sort of close by. So in Spain, you don't have a garbage can in front of your house. You generally have to carry your rubbish to the end of the street where there's big community bins. So Stripe was there with his brother and sisters and a little baby kitten. And as the days went on, as these things happened, there were less kittens until it was just Mr. Stripe. And we were just calling him the stripy kitten, right? Because, and then one day Adam went down and he was there with some ham and getting stripy kitten used to Oliver and getting Oliver used to cats and all the rest of it. And he noticed that the stripy kitten wasn't very well and just made an executive decision, because there was no mum cat. There was never any sign of a mum cat or any, it was just this little kitten trying to survive. So he just made the decision to scoop Mr. Stripe up and into his carrier, and that was that. And Stripe just stayed with us. And we call him a dog cat because he grew up with Oliver, and like Stripe comes when he's called and he sits and he just stands. And I mean, he's an unbelievable cat. But what I love about him the most is he's just so zen. He is such a zen cat, and nothing phases him, and he picks his moments. And I love that. He, if he's in the chair and Sofia Bandita comes over and I want to sit there, he's like, okay, and leaves, right? Because, what's the point? He loves just chilling. If he wants to have a nap, he'll have a nap. Even if he's like, 1 second he's playing with the toy, the next time I'm having a nap. He's very much I'm just going to do what feels right for me at the time.
In the moment.
He's such a cool dude. And I think, wow, that would be awesome to incorporate. I love that in him. I'd love the ability to go, I fancy a nap, I'm going to have one, and just kind of do it. You laughed at Bandita. Bandita is a cat of her own. So her name is Sofia. She was named after the Queen of Spain. And Bandita was a rescue cat. We found her half drowned in a puddle. She was very, very, very young kitten. Her eyes were still blue. And so she was probably about 4 weeks of age, no sign of mum cat, pouring rain. We brought her to the vet. She died twice, our vet said, and they had to revive her, bring her back. And she just fought the whole time. She's who she is. And she has like a black mask over her eyes. So banditos in Spanish is bandit. So a bandita is like girl bandit. So, but little girl bandit. So we decided that was going to be her name.
Oh my gosh, I love that name.
She really is. She is bandita. So anyway, as she progressed, and technically she does have some level of brain damage, or that has said, because she lost oxygen to her brain. So some of her behavior is, interesting. But some of her behavior also is just because she is who she is. And what I love about Bandita is her boundaries. I learned so much about boundary setting from just observing Bandita. If anyone has taken the consent course at Grisha's Academy, the don't grab the pussycat, the actual cat in the course, Claire, the picture is actually Bandita, because she has this look on her face like, you are not going to touch me, which is funny. But the big thing about Bandita's boundaries, and I think it's really super important for anybody just trying to understand or setting their own boundaries, is that they can be fluid. So Bandita has very strict boundaries around being able to touch her. Sometimes you can't walk past her and she'll give you a swipe. Or she'll be very vocal about, it's 10 o'clock, I'm going to bed now. And everybody has to be quiet because I'm going to bed, this sort of thing. But she'll cry. Or my food is now, food time's now.
Yeah.
But some days, you can't look at her and she'll be very much a think again human. Do not come anywhere near me with your stinky human fingers. But other days you could tickle her tummy and she'll be okay with that for a split second, right?
For a split second, yeah.
But it's really interesting because she does have a boundary, a personal space boundary, but it is fluid, right? So she's taught me that boundaries are fantastic, but they're also fluid. And it's okay for them to change. And I shouldn't expect people to one day say no, and then the next day say yes, and think to myself, well, what's on the go with that? Like, it's still a boundary I need to respect, but that it's actually that they are allowed to shift and be fluid. So that's my individual zoo, my zoo of individuals, as we like to call them. Because
that's super cute.
They all have their own sort of personalities and stuff, which we're really proud about. I've had friends who pet ally friends who come around to my house and are just like, it's like being in a house full of people, except they're not. It's like, I know.
I love I love how you incorporated not only your favorite things about them, but then you also talked about like how that favorite thing could be a lesson for you, because it's so funny. I was doing that as you were saying it. You were like, my favorite thing about them is boundary setting. And I'm like, ooh, I want to learn, like, I need that. Right. Like, so I love that you were making those connections. And I really, really, really love that you were talking about boundary setting being fluid, right? Like when I met with you and Grisha, the other day we were talking about my yes, no board, and Grisha was like, maybe you should add a maybe, right? Like have yes, no, maybe. And like things can move around, right? Like if I say yes to something one day, I might move that Post-it over to the no board another day because conditions have changed and my boundaries have changed or whatever, right? That like it's fluid the same way that our behavior is fluid, the same way that our animal behavior is fluid, right? I love that you bring that up. It's really,
totally.
I get so fixed. I'm like, Marissa is A, B, C, D, and E, right? And then like, if I stray from that, it's like, I don't know, there's something weird or some weird story I have about like, you need to be like, this is my identity and these are my boundaries and these are my things. And wait, now I'm doing something different. That's so bizarre.
I think that is one of the gifts of life, isn't it? Is that, we as individuals get to decide who we are, right? We get to decide who we are at any point in time. And part of becoming more self-aware is becoming aware of when those boundaries are shifting.
Totally.
And when that's a valid shift or whether it's a not valid shift. So what I mean by a valid shift is kind of thinking to yourself, am I moving this boundary? So say, for example, your boundary is that you don't work after 8 p.m. at night, right? We'll take something really, really, really simple. And then a request comes in, can you do X? And that's going to take you over that 8 o'clock boundary. And so if you sort of look at yourself and go, well, actually, I didn't start work till later today, or I actually have quite a bit of energy. I don't have that much on tomorrow. And you're always referencing the decision back to yourself. Yeah. Right. So it's always to you where you say, okay, how do I feel? Am I tired? Am I hungry? Do I have anything on tonight? Am I giving anything up? Am I going to put my time and my energy in jeopardy by working late tonight, spilling into tomorrow? And if all those things are no, and a clear no, and you want to do it, then I think that's a valid boundary shift, right? Where it's a not valid boundary shift is when the questions are, if I don't do this, am I going to lose my job? If I don't do this, are people going to think I'm a slacker? If I don't do this, are people going to think I'm just making an excuse because I'm lazy? Is it because I'm selfish? Is it because I'm not dedicated? Those things are invalid.
I have no experience with any of those questions.
So,
Kidding. I'm getting better. I'm getting better.
it's, I mean, something, well, the thing is actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because sometimes we're not aware that we're making decisions based on those questions, right? That for a lot of people, they kind of just leap and change the boundary without really taking the time to settle in and think, is this like, is this, and ask themselves those questions. So yeah, sorry, I went on a tangent. Can you hear those dogs barking outside?
A little bit.
Okay.
But it's fine.
Not too loud.
No,
okay,
cool. Yeah.
I'm not in my normal home studio, so I'm actually upstairs from a busy shop on a busy high street in the United Kingdom. So you might hear some noise in the background. So I'm sorry about that. But yeah, so I mean, a lot of people are not aware of that. Those are the questions that they're asking themselves. And I think when people kind of like slow down and go, I'm going to shift my boundary. Why am I considering shifting this boundary? Then they start to internalize and to ask those questions. So the fact that you say that, like, I never ask myself those questions, but it's good that you do, right? And it's really important that I still get those questions that pop up into my head, and that's healthy, right? And it allows me to make that decision. Am I going to shift my boundary because it's the right thing for me to do at this point in time, based on my stuff, or is it not? Right. And I think we always have to have that conversation with ourselves constantly, just to make sure that we're doing the right thing. But of course, we can't do any of that unless we actually set a boundary in the first place. So
totally. And I think that's a great segue into what we're talking about today, because having boundaries when so our topic is building community, right? How can we build community? And having those boundaries and being self-aware and being able to, what I love what you were saying is like, slow down, take a beat, pause for a moment, ask yourself the question before reacting, right? Those are such great skills to have when you are cultivating or engaging in community, right? So before we move on, how are we defining community, and like what communities are we referring to? Like what is our audience, and what does this look like?
I think community can be defined in loads of different ways. And I want to preface this by saying that I'm not an expert in community building, and I'm not a sociologist. I did study social anthropology in university, and it's always been a interest of mine. So I'm sure there are some academic definitions of communities. And it also depends on if you're looking at defining a virtual community or a community in real life. But by and large, I like to look at communities as a collective group of people who share common values and want to move towards achieving a common goal. And so that's how I see the basic structure of a community. In terms of dogs and dog trainers, it becomes very, very fractured. Our community, if we can use that term loosely, because I don't think we have a dog training community in lots of ways, in a general global sense. If you look at the definition of shared values and shared goals, I think we have sort of dog echo chambers. We've got little fractured groups of people, and bringing those groups of people together is proving to be very difficult in lots of different ways. And I think one of the reasons is that when you look at creating a community based on values, based on shared values and a shared goal, or a shared creating some sort of achievement or structure, you start getting into black and whites. You start getting into lists of rules. So my community refuses to allow anyone to come into my group if their dog is on a choke chain. End of story, full stop, forget it. And while your value may be that you don't want to train a dog or be seen to condone training a dog using an aversive, you then run the risk of alienating a huge group of people who, through whatever reason, are using this method, right? And then there's your fracture.
Yeah.
So you can go down into and then you get into sub fractures, right? So I'm okay with choke chains, but I don't like e-collars. But I'm okay with e-collars, but I don't like choke chains. But I don't like prong collars. But I don't like, and the groups get smaller and smaller and smaller. And then they all have their, fun and games on Facebook, on social media. And then they try and go out into the community, the actual real life dog training community. And again, it's all fractured. It's really difficult. There is a misunderstanding or perhaps a non-recognition of the gray in values. And values can have shades of gray. And I think that's really, really difficult to get heads around and to run conversations in, that you can collectively not agree with using choke chains on a dog, but you can agree to meet somebody halfway.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can say, listen, this is not how I train. I don't believe in this. This isn't where I'm coming from. However, I want to understand you. I want to understand where you're coming from. And I will listen to you and really listen, right? Really properly listen. And then you can listen to me and we could try different things together. And that, I think, is what's missing hugely in building the communities, that sense of gray, that sense of, I don't want to be seen to be associated with anybody using a choke chain. I don't even want to bring it up in conversation to be absolutely terrified, because you're absolutely terrified or fearful that someone's going to label you a choke chain trainer, right? Even now, as I'm discussing this, I can actually feel like my body stiffening a little bit.
I bet,
and being like, wow, somebody out there is going to go, Grisha's school admin just went on about, accepting people who train with choke chains and, all this kind of thing. And going off on that extreme. And again, that's another example of why our industry is so fractured into these communities, because that's not at all what I said, right?
Yeah. I feel like we're living in this like escape avoidance place, right? Where like we're not going to say anything because, like you said, we don't want to be associated with A, B, and C assumption, right? And so then we're like just not saying anything at all. Or there are people that are like saying a lot of things and saying it with a lot of frustration or anger or, typically punishing the behavior of others that we don't like. And both of them feel hard for me. Do you know what I'm saying? Like one feels like I don't want to step out of my box because I might get shocked, right? I might get punished. Or if I'm sitting there shocking someone else, like that doesn't feel good either. And we don't use those techniques, like you and I don't use those techniques on dogs and our clients. So then why are we doing it on each other? It gets really icky really fast. And I love when you were saying, sitting down with someone and saying like, I don't believe in that, but I want to understand where you're coming from. I had a conversation there was a shelter here in Colorado, and I went to go observe their play groups. And because everybody was talking about their play groups and talking about them in a negative way. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go. I'm just going to like ask the director if I can go and watch and see for myself. And when I was there, I was very concerned with how they were running the play groups. And I was very concerned about the behavior I observed, how they were engaging with the dogs. And I also wear my emotions on my face. And so I wound up leaving that interaction. And I wound up reaching out to the director being like, hey, listen, I just want to be authentic with you. I have a few things to say, a few thoughts about the playgroups. Are you interested in hearing them? And she was like, sure. Because I was like, I didn't feel like if I didn't share what I didn't want her to leave thinking I thought that was great. And I wanted to be authentic and say like, hey, I'm concerned about a few things. Are you interested in hearing? She totally had the option to be like, no, thank you. Right. Like she could have opted out and been like, no, thanks. She opted in. And I prepared for this conversation with a friend, and we decided that I was going to upfront say to her, here's what I would love. I would love the playgroups to shift, and I would love for them to look different. So I want you to know that I'm coming into this conversation with a desire, and I want to put it out on the table because it's going to come up anyway. It's going to come up in my conversation. It's going to leak into the conversation no matter what. Right. And she was like, okay, great. I understand that that's your desire. And we went back and forth for like an hour in a really kind way about like, I'm like, hey, I didn't love this. Could there be this as a solution? Right. And basically at the end of the conversation, we agreed to disagree, and nothing's done. Yes. Nothing has been changed about the playgroups. And yet, I don't know, it was a really great, like, one, I went there on my own and didn't make the assumption. Two, I felt like it was inauthentic in my own integrity to be like, I'm going to have a conversation with this woman. Right. Like I want to say, and I want to ask her if she wants to have a conversation. Right. I'm sure my partner would love if I did that more often with him, right? Asked to have the conversation. Right.
Yeah.
So, and being okay with no, right? Like, I think that's that's the work that I need to do all the time. And why cooperative care techniques are a little bit like twingy for me, right? Because I'm just like, wait, no, we have an agenda. I have a desire. I want it to be a certain way. And I have to also be 1,000% comfortable with you saying no, whether you're the person saying, no, I'm going to continue to use the choke chain or whatever, or you're the dog that's like, no, I'm opting out. Right. I have a lot more grace for that situation than I do for a person being like, no, I'm going to continue to do this. So I don't know. It's just an example of, I think, being really clear about what your desire is, stating it, and then also being totally okay that like, you might not make that impact. And then you can create a boundary. Like if that's too painful, like after having watched their techniques, I had to sit down with my team at the time and say, are we going to transfer dogs there? Like, do we want dogs to go there? And that was a conversation that we had, and we decided that we would prefer not to. And that was a boundary that we had, but we had it based off of, I don't know, I felt like more of clear, honest, authentic, kind conversation. Without just saying, you know what, they do this, boom, they're out. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
I know. And I totally love the story. I loved how you went into it with honesty, and I love how you approached your thoughts and feelings with such grace and allowed them again to have the choice to say, no, actually, I don't want to hear your thoughts. And okay, it's like when we train our dogs, we'll be like, Juno, do you want to come outside and do stuff? And she can go, no, I don't feel like it. Well, that's fine. I need to be prepared for her to say no. But in order to do that, I need to listen, and I need to approach it with the headspace of, there might not be an outcome here that is suitable for a Disney movie, right? It's like might not get a happy ending here.
Totally.
But I need to be prepared. But on the other thing, that when I was listening to you speak, and you said it a couple times, and I do want to bring this up because it's really, really super important, where you said that the play groups haven't changed and she didn't take stuff on board and things. I would like to say they haven't changed yet. Right?
Totally.
So I think we also need to bring in a huge modicum of patience when we have these conversations, whether online or in person. And understand that sometimes behavior change doesn't happen right away, and that we we can lay down a foundation for latent learning. And that you never know, perhaps the person who runs the play group 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, 2 years from now, could be doing the dishes and goes, oh, thinking about something that maybe happened in playgroup, and then think, well, Marissa said something about that. I'm going to have a think. And then, sometimes it does. And then the next thing they're thinking, we do need to change here. We might incorporate some of this, or you might find them changing their language slightly.
Mm-hmm. And,
maybe they haven't changed the whole thing.
Totally.
They are making the small steps to go towards it. And for me, that's an achievement. And I think anytime we go into a situation like that with patients and with education and tools, and don't expect anything from the learner, right? That we put the expectation on us to partake that knowledge and to do so with patience. And if the learner decides it's not for me, then it's not for that learner at that time.
At that time, yeah, you're absolutely right.
But it doesn't mean that it won't be for that learner 2 days from now, 2 years from now. This, of course, then takes us to a kind of an icky conversation of, well, what if that learner has their dog on a prong and is just going to keep having their dog on that prong, which, of course, causes pain to that dog, right? Mm-hmm. So, and, you feel like the dog is still on the prong. And it's natural for us to feel like, oh, I failed. Mm-hmm. Because that dog is still on the prong. Again, I would challenge that giving people the information, giving people the education and the foundation for change. Maybe the dog is still on the prong, but maybe that pet ally is starting to slightly think about it differently. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're looking at the prong closer than they did before, perhaps subconsciously, but they're still doing it nonetheless. It's small steps. It's small steps, yeah. We're not going to get some dogs. We're not going to get all dogs off prong collars tomorrow. You have to be realistic. Mm-hmm. But we can start changing people's views towards adversives. We can start flooding the internet and social media with better language, with more positive thoughts, with more grace, with more acceptance. Mm-hmm. And to use that to create those communities with those values. And then hopefully that does create more of a support network for people who are questioning the use of adversives, rather than somebody questioning the use of adversives, going to a trainer and getting chapter and verse on, why they're, you're harming your dog, you're doing this to your dog, you have to take the prong collar off immediately, which of course gets translated into you're a bad human. Yeah. And it's shaming, right? And, totally. And we have to be so careful to be going down that road.
Yeah. And I think, all the things that we're talking about today are just whether it's a community with, like-minded colleagues, whether it's a community of maybe different-minded colleagues coming together, right? Whether it's even the community or relationship between you and your client and you and the dog, these are all skills that can be brought in for more collaborative discussion, right? And more and more effective change, right? Because I'm also hearing you say, not only do we have to be okay for that person to opt out, but we also have to be okay that even if they opt in, their opt-in might look different than what we truly want it to be, right? Like, yes, I want you 100%. To opt in and get rid of the tool today. But what if you opted in and you just, like you said, are rethinking the use of the tool? Like, gosh, that's a win, right? Like, we celebrate approximations for dogs all the time. Like, why couldn't we do that for people? Right.
Exactly. I'm so glad you said that, because I ruminate on this so much. Like, we if our dogs just do like one teeny step forward when we're teaching them a thing, we jackpot,
like firework, we're like so pumped. Yeah.
Yay. And now, let's reinforce that behavior before we move on to the next. But if the human learner is like, well, I'm not too sure, can I keep the the choke on at the same time, but use the harness, but have the choke as a backup. You know, we lose our minds a lot of times. We go, no, I'm not letting you have the choke chain. And so, yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because that is so true. And we do that all the time. And we don't allow our human learners the same leeways or the same allowances as we do our dogs. That's so important. Really, really important.
Yeah.
100%.
And so your position with Grisha's amazing school. And I can't say enough good things. I have like a million tabs open of like classes that I
thank you.
I'm feeling overwhelmed by like the amount of classes. I'm like, oh, I have to sit down and carve out time. It's so good.
Yeah. We have so many classes, honestly. I mean, I think people get really blown away they buy a membership and they think, oh, there'll be 20 classes. And I think there's like over 95 now classes.
Wow. Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah. It's crazy good. And I'm biased, of course.
Yeah.
But I think it's great. But the thing about it is it's collaborative, right? So it's not just Grisha. It's not just Grisha teaching 95 courses of Grisha's thoughts and Grisha's, you know, she's invited.
Even though I would listen to that too.
I would. Well,
I would listen to.
I know. We do. I would do. I think shit should be like, I'm not doing 95.
I know she would say she would do that.
You could just put her back classes on like repeat. But you know, it's a collaborative space.
Yeah.
And her vision from the very start was to invite instructors that she admires and loves and wants to give a voice to, and bring us all together in a space where we can work together and talk about our different methods and explore different aspects of being in our industry. And also invite people who are not necessarily in our industry, but who have some connection with dogs. So Suki Baxter, who is an amazing life coach, but also helps people work through pain and trauma, did an amazing webinar back in January called How to Train Your Nervous System, which was just brilliant. And it just was phenomenal, how trauma can get trapped in your own nervous system response. And she adapted it for how we can relate with our human clients, but also with our doggy clients as well. Fantastic webinar, really, really great. But, you know, again, we circle back to the communities. I think, you know, Grisha's school is an example of a community, or one that we're trying to create, and that we're trying to get different people in. And some people don't have, you know, bang on the same view as Grisha. And, you know, we have had where we go into the Q&A and, you know, an instructor might answer a question one way and Grisha might go, oh, that's really interesting. I see where you're coming from. I'd like to add, what do you think? And there's this interesting collaboration space, which happens. We have a discussion panel as well, a series of classes on doggy language. So Lily Chin's a phenomenal book, the Doggy Language book. We created a discussion panel. So Grisha was on the panel, Chirag Patel was on the panel. Kathy Sadeo was on the panel. I mean, it was just amazing. And we asked our members and our students to send in clips of dog behavior. And God, the differences of opinion was really, really fascinating. And we even had the instructors sort of going, wow, I never saw that. That's a great idea, to the other instructor who was, you know, and it was such a great space. It really was a great space. And you know, that's one of the things I'm particularly proud of, or one of the things that, although pride's not one of my favorite emotions, but one of the things that I absolutely love about my job is that I get to not only hang out with all these amazing people, and I get to meet some amazing people like yourself, because you know, Grisha's school brought us together. I get to facilitate these conversations, and I get to facilitate these examples of different people still being able to collaborate and discuss and disagree, right? I'm wondering, like, because I mean, I'm a part of the school, right? And I totally agree. It's super collaborative. I love the environment. And what do you think makes that environment so safe, right? Because
people disagree and they do it well when there is safety in the environment. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
when people can disagree all the time, but they can do it really poorly, and they can do it with a lot of angst and tension. And that is a sign that where they're not feeling safe, where they're feeling threatened. Right. So
Yeah.
what do you think is about that community that makes it so safe and collaborative?
I'm glad you asked me that, because I think that sometimes we're like, have we just lucked out? But it's not luck. I would say there are two things. One is Grisha herself, and the amazing example of a human being that she
and
is.
You.
No, I'm not that. Thank you. So Grisha asked me to come join the team just before COVID, and just before she ran her How to Human course on the school, which is another great course. So do check it out. It's fantastic. And I joined up with the course, and I realized through it that I had a lot of personal growth to do myself, and a lot more than I thought I did. And again, I wasn't as self-aware as I wanted to be. And Grisha was instrumental in helping me learn about meditation, about full body scans, checking in with myself, boundary setting. And she walks the walk, you know. She's very strict in a lot of ways about people who work for her respecting themselves. And she's, you know, she constantly is like, you know, if you get this message, ignore it till tomorrow because you should be in bed, you know, sort of thing. And I'm like, yeah, I am. But it's just the way that she is in her presence. I think she casts a glow around people that they want to be their best selves, not for her, but magically for themselves. You know, they
Oh, that's a good way to describe it.
Right. Like, it's, yeah. Whenever I'm with Grisha or I'm around her or I'm conversing with her, it's like, I feel that just her presence makes me want to be better for me. Right. And she has this ability to create that aura around her wherever she goes. It's just magic, you know. It's better than an X Factor. It's like, you know, it's magic because she's so unassuming about it as well. But that said, she will she will rise up to an occasion to maintain the safe space, right? So we have boundaries, and we have some boundaries based on our values. And this kind of circles back around to the community conversation we started with, defining communities. So we were talking about values and how they can self-regulate. So we have some pretty strict values. We have some things that we adhere to that don't have grays. So we have non-gray values. So, and these are pretty, you know, these are red lines, right? So these are the big ones. So bullying, harassment, intolerance. But we're talking about really blatant stuff. So we're talking about the trolling. We're talking about the people who come in with inflammatory language. You know, that said, I have never met anyone with more patience than Grisha. And so she has taught us as her admins and her moderators to also have patience and grace. And I think that's the other bit. That's the second part of our community and our space, is that we always try to assume the other person is functioning to the best of their ability, right? That what they're saying sometimes doesn't necessarily reflect how they feel about us or the subject matter. It could be something else entirely, right? I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here, but do bring me back. I saw something recently about reactions and how people react to things, and how you should view your own reaction. But I took it and interpreted to how I should view other people's reactions. And it was basically, you know, you're walking along and you have a cup of coffee, right? And somebody bangs into you, or, you know, and you spill your coffee and you go off on one, right? And you turn around and your reaction is, right? And the narrative then changes to be, well, actually, you didn't spill your coffee. Your cup wasn't full of coffee. Your cup was full of anger. Your cup was full of upsetness. You were bitter. You were cross. So when it spilled, when it got knocked, that's what came out of you, right? And it's got nothing to do with the coffee. It's got stuff that's going on with you, inside you. So
where is that from?
I saw it somewhere on Facebook, honest to God. And I've been trying for ages to find it again. So if anybody knows where that came from, please let me know. Because
the reason why I ask is because I just listened to Michael Singer's podcast. So and talking about how we're like, I love the physical analogy of the coffee, but that we are uncomfortable and we spend a lot of our time trying to arrange the environment, arrange the conditions around us so that we don't feel uncomfortable. And so then when somebody knocks into us, or when there's a red light, when we're in a rush, or there's all these little disturbances, right? Like you were saying, I don't know the word you use when you got knocked and the coffee spilled, right? It's like, it's all these little disturbances that come into us. And so then we try really hard to control all the conditions around us so that we don't feel additional levels of discomfort. It's an amazing podcast. I will link to it in the show notes.
Please do. I want to listen to that. It sounds like it'd be right up my alley.
It's so wonderful. And it's like what you're saying, right? It's like, is it really about the coffee? Not really. It's about like, gosh, you're holding so much and then you just get disturbed.
Yeah.
And then it comes out in this way.
And then it just comes out. And it's a good analogy for yourself, but it's also a good analogy for how to approach people that may have a disproportionate reaction to something that's been posted in our group, or something that's been said on one of our courses, or some feedback for a course that, that person may have been triggered by something. You just don't know. You don't know what's in that person's cup until it gets knocked, right? And
I love that.
It's just, you just don't know. And something knocked that person's cup. And I think going back to Grisha, and then the lessons that she has taught us, not in a school marmy way, but in her wonderful just radiating way, is that when people do kind of spill over, we must always, in the first instance, try and understand where they're coming from, and give them the option to explain, or to do some self-examination and apologize, or say, I feel really emotional about this subject, but I'm really finding it hard to. And that's when you start to have that dialogue, right? That's when the door starts to open a little bit, and you start seeing into where this person is coming from. If, however, you do kind of try and open the door and go, hi, is everything okay? Can I help? What can I do? Is there anything I can do? But if that person then slams that door shut and then comes back with more aggression or more inappropriate comments, or then, you do have to then make the decision to go, I don't think you're ready for this space yet. I think you're not ready for this space. We're here when you are. And if you want to take it offline and PM or whatnot, that's fine. But, we do have values, and we do have to adhere to some boundaries.
Yeah.
You're always going to get people, who do break and enters. You're always going to get people who knock into you, right? It's always going to happen. And you will get people who knock into you on purpose. And I like to joke, actually, that, while I abhor violence, or, I always try to respond from a place of understanding and tolerance and patience. If someone is coming for me, like really coming for me, we're talking, somebody, really coming for me with intent. And I don't necessarily mean verbal, but verbal, physical. I'm not going to whip out my phone and turn on my Headspace app.
Totally.
That's very inappropriate. And I think as well, we sometimes we can be accused, people who sort of train from emotions or like to respond with understanding. We sometimes get accused of being like, oh, you're going to meditate them into understanding. And it's like, no, actually, we're not complete we don't go completely the other way. There is a time and a place, and I feel that within communities, there are appropriate responses, and the appropriate responses are inevitably linked to the community values.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I answered your question about why I feel this is a really safe space. I mean, we are here. We're always available for people to ask us questions.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be in some random club, or you don't have to be, anybody can email me school@grishastewart.com and ask questions, and I will get to them. I help as much as I can. I think we get a lot of feedback from that we're real people, and people love that. They love that we're an organic, small and mighty team of real people who really honestly care, right? And we talk about how we can best serve our community all the time. And I know creating communities attached to schools and things is like the cool thing now, right? And there's all these courses you can take on how to maximize your engagement, and it's all geared towards money. Yeah, it's all geared towards money.
You're right. A lot of the membership podcasts and things like that.
Yeah. Whereas when we talk about a membership, we're like, is it affordable? So, we can make sure that the information is getting to people. Are we making this inclusive enough? Are we not inclusive? Do we need to be looking for other things? Do we need to, these things are the things that we talk about all the time. We are working on some certification programs, some new certification programs. And we are looking at ways to, like, our codes of conduct. And one of the things that Grisha is very, very, very strong on, and I totally agree with her, is that we need a code of conduct, not just for using adversives with the dogs, but also using adversive or aversive language with the humans.
Yes, I love that.
And making sure that we also have a code of conduct, how people with a CBATI designation, that we sign up to a code of conduct that says, we're not going to discriminate. We're not going to treat people like X, Y, and Z. We're not going to resort to shaming. We're not going to. And I think that's really, really progressive. And kudos to the UK dog training charter run by one of the ladies who's involved with that is Denise O'Moore. And they, in order to become an organization listed with them, they also have a code of ethics, which is, and they encourage people to, and I really want to get this right, they encourage people to look at the United Kingdom's code of conduct for working with people with disabilities and Equities Act. That's it. I was thinking to myself, Denise is going to kill me for not getting this right. But, and they're saying, as a dog training organization, you need to have something in there that relates to the humans as well. And I just thought, this is just fantastic. What a great idea. And Grisha is very keen on that as well. We try really hard to funnel back money that we make, because we are business, but, we do funnel back quite a lot. We have a huge shelter program. So if nobody's heard about that, it's another community thing that we do. So if you work for a shelter or an animal charity anywhere in the world, it's not just United States based. We have a whole series of courses designed for people who work in shelters that we've made available for free. It's a massive big bundle on the school, and all you need to do is send the office an email, so info@grishastewart.com, and ask for more information on how to apply.
That's awesome.
And it's just great. We've had so many people sign up. We've got shelters all over the world, and it's great. And it's like, we're changing the world. But you can't do that unless you create that inclusive community, right?
Yeah, it sounds like there's a ton of self-reflection, which I think and there's a ton of ongoing conversation. It's like that, to circle back all the way to the beginning, it's like that boundaries conversation where it's, your things are fluid, right? It's like, okay, we think we're being inclusive now. Okay, let's check in 2 months later. Let's get feedback from our community. How can we shift things, right? Like there is this this constant ebb and flow of, I hope, honoring where you are at, right? Like honoring the things that you have done in addition. And I know Grisha's really big on gratitude, sort of honoring where you're at, right? And the steps that you have made, but also looking beyond where you're at and making sure that you're still leaning into those values, right? And so I think that that's, you know, I do want to give a little disclaimer to folks that might be listening that are like, yeah, I can't look beyond somebody, a client, a colleague, whatever, who's using an aversive. I can't look beyond that. And it's like, yeah, and maybe you can't today, maybe you can tomorrow, right? Maybe you never will, right? Like maybe that is your boundary. It's hard and fast. But I would like to encourage folks to self-reflect, whether that's with a professional, right? Because I think that like we see a lot in our profession and it can be really heavy at times. So whether that is that you need a professional to help support you and, you know, guide that self-reflection process, but, or whether it is that you do it with another safe colleague or friend or your own community, right? But, being able to, again, like pause and reflect, I think is really important for like what the work that you're doing, but also for the individuals listening, right? What do I need to pause and reflect? What feels good for me to make a shift? What feels really, really sticky? And I'm curious, does it remain sticky forever or can it get a little bit more wiggly? And do I need the help of a professional to get a little bit more wiggly? Like, I think that there's no shame in that, again, because I do think that there's a lot of trauma in our profession that we experience and that we come into this profession with. And I think it is just a plug for folks to take care of themselves in ways that feel important and necessary.
100%. I so agree with that. And I think, you know, it is also important for us to acknowledge that if people have gone through the work, or even if they don't want to do the work, and have decided that their boundary is hard and fast, like you say, then as a community, we have to accept that. I have friends who have very, very strict boundaries, very, very strict boundaries. Facebook friends and friends in real life. And we have many a conversation of boundary setting and being fluid and working through scenarios, you know, and so what would you do with this? And then they would turn to me and go, well, what would you do with this? And what is with that? And sometimes we don't have the answers, and that's perfectly okay too.
Totally.
And
yeah.
If, you know, I have friends, who, you know, will not absolutely 100%, you know, go anywhere near Lima, right? Least intrusive, minimally aversive. They will not, even the thought of it turns their stomach, right? They just don't even want to. Aversives have no place at all, right? At all, full stop, nothing, even stress. So I you know, I know people who are on that operating spectrum, that plane, and they have worked through it. They've worked through it in their minds, and you know, they are where they are, and they're happy with that, where they are, you know. And I'm not there. That's not where I am. But it doesn't mean that I can't be friends with them and they can't be friends with me, because I completely respect where they are and they respect where I am as well. But we would not have gotten to that respect if we weren't able to communicate with each other.
Yeah, it's
and
huge.
That's the whole thing, because otherwise people will look at me and go, oh, she's a balance trainer, or throw some other label at me. They'll say, oh, she's a Lima, she's a this, she's a that. Just because I said I'm not hard line, bang, right? If they take the time to talk to me, they'll realize that my definition of an adversive is quite possibly very different from their definition of an adversive. And that I look at things a little bit, you know, possibly more broadly, or maybe I'm deluded. I don't know, but I am where I am, right?
Yeah, you are.
I mean, you know, and I had to accept that as well. You know, being self-aware means that, you know, you have to open yourself to the possibility that you're wrong too. And, you know, I have learned so much, even, the past year, the past week. I just continually learning and reassessing and changing. Am I ever going to go out and buy an e-collar? No. Right. Am I ever going to use one? No. Right. So that's not changed. If a client comes to me for a bat session and their dog is on a prong and they're terrified, will I let them keep the prong on the dog, but use a harness? But just so they've got that prong there, just so they see it, not to use it, depending on the situation, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to say no to that person. That person's coming to me. They want me to help them with their reactive dog. The last thing I want to do is shame them over a bit of equipment when they've come to me. And that takes a lot of courage.
A lot of courage.
And admit, I'm having a problem with my dog. Please help me. Right.
Yeah.
It's like if someone's drowning, you don't criticize, and they're holding out their hand for you. You don't criticize that they got into the, pool with the wrong equipment, or they weren't wearing a life jacket. You haul them out of the water.
Yeah, you haul them out of the water first. Sure.
Right.
Sure. And, you also get curious with that client as to what that piece of equipment means for them. Right. Yes. Because like you said, it might be this level, level of security that they are very concerned about taking it off. And when they have taken it off, A, B, and C has happened. So they have a learning history around using it and not using it. We need to honor that the same way that we are honoring the dog's learning history. Right. Exactly. So all this stuff is parallel. Right.
Exactly. And that's not to say that that's where it all stops either.
Totally.
So to go back from pulling the person out of the pond, I pulled that person out of the pond. I saved their life. They asked me for help. I gave it to them. They're going to be traumatized. They asked for help in a traumatic situation. And let's not kid ourselves. A lot of people who do come to us, they do feel that like they're drowning, right? A lot of people do. And, I'm not going to give them the lecture there and then.
Yep.
I'm going to help them feel safe and secure first. They need a sense of safety. They need to identify me as someone who's going to be there for them and help them, and as a safe space, someone that they can rely on and trust. And I'm going to go from there. I will get that dog off the prong collar eventually. That's my goal, right? But I'm gonna have to take everything into account in order to do it. And I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to, you can't do bat with a prong collar. I don't want people now starting to say, Claire went on Marissa's podcast and said that you can do bat with a prong collar, and Grisha's going, oh my God. That's not at all what we're saying here. What we're saying is that, the prong is incidental. Yeah. That the dog is on the harness.
Yeah.
But the prong is like a safety blanket. It's incidental. Yeah. It doesn't have anything to do with the actual work, with the actual
modification. Yeah.
Except it's just a visual safety security blanket for the human.
Yeah.
That's all it is. You know, it could be a rubber ducky. It is so inconsequential to the training and to the session and to the dog. Right. I mean, some people could argue, and I can actually, my brain is actually going down it's not inconsequential to the dog, because the dog has been conditioned that when he's wearing the prong collar, he'll have a certain response. And, I can see that road, and I can see the arguments there. But for the sake of our discussion right now, in that scenario, that would be my thought, would be that the prong collar is there as something to help the person. And we're not using it in the training, but it's there to help a person.
Yeah.
And then, the session goes well. You can then start bridging the conversation of, session went really well. How about we try the last 10 minutes without like the next session, let's do half and half, or 3/4 and 1/4. And then, gradually move that dog off that collar. And for me, I feel better in that scenario than shaming somebody.
Yeah.
In that. in that situation. And because it doesn't do anything, and it doesn't help. And it doesn't help our community either.
Yeah.
And this is, you know, what the goal is to create this discussion, to create this event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that what you're saying too, it like, to me, feels like doing it with a really known safe environment first, so that, that the behavior of you being curious and asking questions, doesn't get punished right away, right? From somebody that feels threatened by your question or something like that. So the invitation to the listeners really is, starting small with folks that, you feel safe with, which it, you know, in terms of really big topics, I have done that. I'm like, hey, I'm thinking a thing about a thing, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong, or I don't know if this is appropriate for me. Like, I'm learning about this topic. Like, can I ask you a question about this? Right. I do think that that is a safer place to start. Right. And I think people are starting in Facebook groups. It's like, no. Like, dial it in and start. Don't start in like a group like that. Start in, you know, your internal group, whether it's just a friend or colleague, or maybe one person that you felt connected with in that Facebook group, you private message them, right? Like, there is this sort of like, you know, just everyone's typing away and feeling like they can express themselves in those environments. And I'm wondering if we could, in addition to the pause and the reflect, right, is that you're also reining in who you're having these conversations with, right? So that they are more successful, because we want this behavior of being curious to get reinforced so that people can do it. If the opposite of being curious is being judgmental and reactive and all the things, right? So it's a replacement behavior that I think would be great for all of us to set the conditions up so that we're more successful at that behavior. Kathy Sadeh and I always talk about how, like, we are really good at being reactive. Like, we're from the East Coast. We are, you know, she's from New York, I'm from New Jersey, right? Like we have a lot of reinforcement history for being reactive to things, right? For like immediately having some sort of assumption or whatever. And so we always talk about, like, how can we create the conditions so that we can be curious and we can reinforce that behavior as heavily as we have reinforced being reactive in the past. So, just creating that safe space, right? So
it's hard because, you know, it's like just reflecting on the conversation that we're having now, and the conversation that we've had in the so far on this podcast. It's like, running stuff through my head. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have said gay. Maybe I shouldn't have said I want to go back to the 90s because, you know, it wasn't all that tolerant time. And maybe I shouldn't have. And all of these just create the roadblocks for the conversations that need to happen.
Totally.
And I do think that even though it's scary and can be difficult, we do need to be able to have these conversations and talk about the gray within the values, right? But to be very very open and to be very aware of where we're having these conversations, like you say, in the safe spaces. And in order to do that, we need safe communities with those values, because you know it is. I'm going to go off on another tangent. Well, not really. So there is a lady on Facebook who I have a massive girl crush on at the moment. I absolutely adore her. She is like my community goddess. I would love to have a dog training community like her community. She's not a dog trainer. She's a social worker in the United States. And her name is Jacelyn Wetzel. And she runs every Friday on her Facebook page. She runs a group called Black Friend Friday. And it's a safe space on Facebook where people who have questions about Black people, Black culture, race relations, and community, and how we can become better allies, go into that space and ask questions with curiosity and learning. And the amount of things that I have learned is just phenomenal. She does have this sort of, but the way her community runs is that everybody has these set values, and that they understand that we don't tolerate bullying, we don't tolerate the crazy trolls, but we do want to understand where they're coming from, so we do give them an opportunity to ask their questions, and we try and meet them with understanding. When people join up for Black Friend Friday, she does ask that you're quiet for the first 2 to 3 weeks, and you just observe and watch, and not to just kind of charge in. And let other people,
I love that.
Yeah, it's great. So it's to let other people speak, right? Let other people speak, learn from what's going on. And boy, the learning is unbelievable. And I've learned so much there, and I've become much more self-aware. And even though I feel like I've done quite a lot to be aware of my own privilege, just spending a few weeks on that page made me realize I've got so much more to do, right? But not in a shame way. In a yay, right? Excellent. You're aware of this. Come, have a seat, sit down, learn with us, grow with us. If this is not your space right now, right, then that's fine. Bye. But do come back, right? Do come back and check. And she does have a team of admins, but they're again, they just work on the space values. And there has been a few, there's every now and again, there's a little bit of a thing because it's Facebook and drama. But the way that she and her admins handle it is a masterclass in how to run a community group on Facebook. Highly recommend that people check it out. She's an amazing lady. And the way that she answers some of the questions is a masterclass in grace and patience and understanding. And I think she's fantastic. And I'd love it if we had a space like that.
Yeah. We will link to that, and I will check that out. It sounds awesome.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Well, Claire, we will link to all of the amazing, to the Grisha Stewart Academy on the show notes, and all the amazing resources that you talked about, Suki Baxter's class, all of that. So that's where folks can find you online.
Thank you so much. And I also want to say that Marissa taught an amazing webinar in the school as well. So she taught a webinar called Big Feelings, and it was about supporting our clients with their reactive dogs. And it was brilliant. It was so well received. It was really, really good. And we're welcoming you back again, aren't we, Marissa? You're coming back in July. And you're going to do a webinar on client intakes.
Yep.
Awesome. Which I'm really looking forward to. I think it's going to be fantastic. So we've got a lot of great things coming up. I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course.
This is a new thing for me. Thank you so much for wanting to give me a voice today.
Yeah.
And like I say, it's not something that I'm used to, but I hope that people enjoyed it and maybe took a few takeaways from it. I might regret saying this, but if anyone wants to contact me, they can get a hold of me at school@grishastewart.com. But I promise to receive all the emails with grace and patience and respond
within your boundaried office time.
Yes, very much so. Yes,
within the boundaried office time.
Exactly.
Well, lovely to have you, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
The theme music is called Sunny, provided royalty-free from bensound.com. The audio is mixed and edited by James Eady at beheard.org.uk.